All right, so we're taking a deep dive today into this CVE 2025-0108,
Brace.
a critical flaw that was found in Palo Alto Networks PAN-OS software.
Yes.
And it's pretty scary stuff because this is the software that helps manage those next-generation firewalls that a lot of organizations depend on.
It is.
And our deep dive today is going to be based on a recent report that was put out by U.com, ARI. And this report's really eye-opening because it shows just how much of a threat this vulnerability poses.
Yes.
And the really concerning part is that it's already being actively exploited out there in the wild.
Right.
You know, it's to not just some theoretical risk anymore.
Yeah.
This is a real and present danger for tons of organizations.
Thousands.
Thousands, yeah.
Thousands.
So let's get right into it.
Okay.
CVE 2025-0108.
Yeah.
What exactly are we looking at here? What kind of flaw is this? And what can attackers actually do with it?
So this is a critical one.
Yeah.
It scores an 8.8 out of 10 on the CVSS severity scale.
Oh, wow.
That's getting a D in security.
Yeah.
So yeah, it impacts various versions of PAN-OS, the software used to manage those next-generation firewalls that many organizations rely on.
Right.
So if you're using these firewalls, listen up, because this vulnerability could have huge consequences.
Yeah, you really have to pay attention to this one.
Yes.
So CVE 2025-0108 is an authentication bypass vulnerability.
That's right.
And what that means is attackers can actually execute PHP scripts
Yes.
on vulnerable systems without needing any credentials.
It's like a built-in backdoor to your security system.
It's like someone left the keys under the mat.
Yeah.
So how does this actually work? I mean, how is it even possible to bypass authentication on a system like PAN-OS? What's the technical root cause here?
Well, the report highlights this discrepancy in how Nginx, Apache, and PHP components within PAN-OS handle web requests.
Okay.
Think of these components like gears that make the firewall's web interface function. They should work together smoothly.
Right.
But this flaw creates a miscommunication, a gap in those security checks that attackers can take advantage of.
So basically a technical miscommunication leading to a security breakdown.
Exactly.
But how can this even happen in a system like PAN-OS? This isn't some off-brand software we're talking about.
You're right. It's not.
This is supposed to be top-of-the-line firewall stuff. So how does a vulnerability like this even sneak in?
I think this really highlights a challenge that many organizations face these days, and that's the growing complexity of modern web applications.
I see.
The more features you add, the more functionalities you pack in, the larger the attack surface becomes, and the harder it becomes to lock down every single nook and cranny.
Yeah, it's like you build a bigger house, you got more doors and windows to worry about.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder about the security testing that happened during development.
Right.
Did they miss any red flags that could have prevented this?
The report does point to some potential gaps in security testing.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to authentication, input validation. This really underscores the need for really strong testing. Yeah.
Throughout the entire software development process, security can't just be an afterthought.
No.
You can't just tack it on at the end.
It has to be part of the process from day one.
Right, from the beginning.
Because finding a vulnerability like this after it's already out in the wild, well, it's kind of like closing the barn door after the horse is already bolted.
Yeah.
And we know attackers are pretty quick to exploit these kinds of weaknesses.
Oh, yeah.
So how are they actually using this CVE 2025-0108? What are they doing with it?
They're using it to get into firewall settings.
Okay.
They could get their hands on sensitive information, open back doors for even more access,
Wow.
or even mess with the firewall to block important data flow.
So they could essentially shut down your defenses.
Yeah. Imagine that.
That's a lot of power.
Yeah, that's the kind of power this vulnerability gives them.
And it's not just about this one vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about chaining exploits.
Right.
How does that work, and what makes it so dangerous?
Think of it like a domino effect.
Okay. Attackers love to combine different vulnerabilities to reach their goals. So they might use CVE 2025-0108 to get that initial access.
Right.
But then they chain it with something else, like CVE 2024-9474 or CVE 2025-0111
Oh, wow.
to gain even more control over the system.
So it's like a multi-stage attack.
Yeah, get in, escalate privileges, and then cause chaos.
It's a pretty scary thought.
Yeah, that is.
This CVE 2025-0108 really opens the door for some pretty serious scenarios.
Definitely.
So have there been vulnerabilities in the past that are similar to this? Something that can maybe give us some insight into the challenges we're facing today and maybe even offer some lessons learned?
There are definitely some parallels.
Okay.
Especially when you look at vulnerabilities that have hit critical network infrastructure management tools in the past. For example, there's CVE 2018-13379, a path traversal vulnerability in Fortinet's FortiOS SSL VPN.
Path traversal.
Yeah, imagine a file system as a library with different sections that are off limits. Path traversal is like an attacker finding a secret passage that lets them bypass those checkpoints and get into those restricted areas.
I see.
So in the case of CVE 2018-13379, it allowed attackers to access sensitive files within FortiOS, potentially stealing credentials and compromising the entire VPN.
So it's basically unauthorized access to sensitive files.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, there are some clear parallels. Both vulnerabilities show just how important it is to secure those internet-facing systems. These are often the entry point for attackers. And any weakness can have a ripple effect impacting the security of the whole network.
So with both CVE 2018-13379 and CVE 2025-0108, it's not enough to just patch the vulnerability. You have to strengthen those access controls and security configurations to really minimize the attack surface.
Exactly.
So are there other examples that kind of reinforce this need for heightened vigilance?
Definitely. There's CVE 2021-26084, which affected Atlassian Confluence. This vulnerability was a big one because it let attackers execute malicious code on vulnerable servers. Essentially giving them full control.
So once they're in, they basically have the keys to the kingdom.
Pretty much.
And what's particularly scary about this one is how quickly it was weaponized. Soon after it was disclosed, a proof of concept exploit was released.
Which made it so easy for attackers to exploit the flaw.
So even less skilled attackers could take advantage of this.
Exactly.
That's a big problem.
It is.
It shows how important real-time vulnerability management is and how crucial that rapid response is.
Absolutely.
When a vulnerability pops up, organizations need to act fast to patch it or mitigate the risk before the attackers get a foothold.
Exactly.
It's like race against time.
Yeah, it is.
And it seems like the attackers are winning.
It can feel that way sometimes.
Are there any other examples that really highlight the need for urgency?
Well, there's the infamous Apache Struts vulnerability CVE 2017-5638. This one led to that massive Equifax data breach, exposing the personal information of millions.
Over 147 million people.
It was huge.
That was a big one.
It was one long.
It all stemmed from inadequate input validation. A common theme we see in these vulnerabilities, attackers could sneak in malicious code through a flaw in the framework's file upload functionality. And that gave them access to sensitive data stored on Equifax's servers.
Wow.
It was a costly mistake for Equifax.
It was.
Both financially and in terms of their reputation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have these three big examples, Fortinet showing us the importance of securing those internet-facing systems. Atlassian highlighting the speed at which these vulnerabilities can be exploited. And Apache Struts demonstrating those huge consequences of not patching quickly enough. What can we learn from these as we deal with CVE 2025-0108?
So what are the key takeaways here?
First, securing those internet-facing systems.
Like firewalls and VPNs. Yes, exactly. Those should be your top priority. Second, you need a rapid response. You need a robust vulnerability management program in place to identify, assess, and remediate those vulnerabilities quickly before they can be exploited.
Before the attackers get there. And finally, you need secure coding practices. And rigorous testing from the very beginning. To prevent these vulnerabilities from ever being introduced in the first place.
Exactly.
These are some pretty important lessons.
They are.
Especially when you consider the massive data breaches and financial losses that have happened because of vulnerabilities like these.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
And it's not just about learning from the past. It's about understanding those emerging threats that are shaping the future of cybersecurity.
So what's on the horizon? What trends and predictions are you keeping an eye on?
Well, one trend that's particularly concerning is the increasing exploitation of those known vulnerabilities. In 2024 alone, 768 CVEs were exploited out there in the wild.
Wow.
That's a 20% increase from the year before.
So the bad guys are getting better at finding and exploiting these weaknesses. And they're doing it more often.
It's a worrying trend.
It is.
And what's even more concerning is that the time between when a vulnerability is disclosed and when it's exploited is shrinking.
Oh, wow.
In some cases, attackers are weaponizing vulnerabilities on the same day they're publicly disclosed.
Correct.
Sometimes even before.
So they're already exploiting it before anyone even knows about it.
Sometimes, yeah.
That's a little unnerving.
It is a challenge.
It is.
But it's not impossible to overcome.
So what can we do if they're already exploiting it before we even know about it?
One approach that's gaining traction is something called proactive threat hunting.
Proactive threat hunting?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's all about actively searching for signs of malicious activity within your network.
Okay.
You're not waiting for an alert.
You're going out looking for them.
Yeah, it's like having a team of detectives constantly on the lookout.
So you're not just setting up alarms and waiting for them to go off.
You're
actively seeking out the bad guys.
Exactly.
That's pretty intense.
It is a more proactive approach to security.
It is.
And it's becoming increasingly necessary.
Yeah.
And then there's the rise of AI-powered cyber attacks.
AI can be used by attackers.
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, no.
AI is a powerful tool.
It is.
And it can be used for good or bad.
Right.
And attackers are using it to automate and enhance their attacks.
Okay.
We're seeing AI-powered tools that can quickly scan for vulnerabilities, generate exploit code,
Wow.
and even adapt their attacks in real time to avoid detection.
So it's like AI is giving them superpowers.
In a way, yeah.
So what can we do? If you're using AI, do we need to fight fire with fire?
AI is definitely becoming an essential tool for defenders as well.
Okay.
We're seeing AI-powered security tools that can analyze network traffic,
Right.
detect malware, identify phishing attacks. Yeah.
And even proactively hunt for threats.
So we need to start using AI to defend ourselves.
In a way, yes.
But it's not just about the technology, right?
Right.
We need to adapt our security frameworks and principles as well.
Absolutely.
So what kind of frameworks are we talking about?
One approach that's gaining a lot of traction is zero trust architecture.
Zero trust architecture.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
It's built on the principle of never trust, always verify.
Okay.
It means every user, device, and application needs to be authenticated and authorized before they can access anything.
Anything at all.
Regardless of where they are or what network they're on.
So it's like having a security checkpoint at every single door in the building.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Not just at the main entrance.
Exactly.
Guess you're assuming that nobody is trustworthy by default.
Right.
And you're implementing really strict access controls and constant monitoring.
To verify every single request and action.
So even if an attacker gets through one layer of security,
the damage is limited.
Exactly.
Zero trust sounds pretty intense.
It does.
Is it really necessary? Isn't that going a bit overboard with security?
It might sound like overkill.
Yeah.
But those traditional security perimeters just aren't enough anymore.
Right.
Attackers are always finding ways to bypass them.
Yeah, they are.
Zero trust is about creating a more dynamic and resilient security posture.
Okay.
One that can adapt as the threats evolve.
And this is especially important in the context of CVE 2025-0108, right?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, one of the key recommendations for mitigating CVE 2025-0108 is to restrict access to the management web interface.
Okay.
To only trusted internal IPs.
Right.
That's a practical example of zero trust in action.
I see.
By limiting access,
Yeah.
you reduce the attack surface.
Makes it harder for the attackers to exploit the vulnerability.
Exactly.
So zero trust is about being proactive.
Yes.
And minimizing the damage even if a breach does happen.
That's the goal.
And all of this is happening against a backdrop of increasing regulatory pressure.
Right.
Organizations are being pushed to patch those known exploited vulnerabilities. So what does that mean for organizations?
Regulatory frameworks are getting stricter.
Okay.
Agencies like CISA are mandating the remediation of vulnerabilities listed in the KEV catalog.
The Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog.
Exactly.
And for example, federal organizations were required to patch CVE 2025-0108 by March 11th, 2025.
That's right.
So it's not just about protecting yourself anymore. It's about meeting those regulatory requirements and avoiding potential penalties.
Yeah, the stakes are high.
They are.
Cybersecurity is a business imperative now.
It is.
It's not just an IT issue anymore.
Right.
Organizations that don't take it seriously,
Yeah.
they risk financial penalties, reputational damage, loss of customer trust.
It's a big deal.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
The technical details of CVE 2025-0108, the broader systemic issues,
Right.
lessons from past vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
and those emerging threats that are shaping the future of cybersecurity.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in.
It is.
But what does this all mean for our listeners?
Yeah.
What are the practical steps that they can take to protect themselves?
That's the big question.
It is.
And while these threats are sophisticated, and they're evolving rapidly,
They are.
There are concrete steps that organizations can take to mitigate their risks.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Okay.
What's the absolute top priority for anyone listening who might be impacted by CVE 2025-0108?
Patch management.
Patch management.
Get those systems upgraded.
Right.
Palo Alto Networks has released patched versions of PAN-OS.
Okay.
And organizations need to upgrade ASP.
Right away.
And as we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
restricting access to the management web interface to only those trusted internal IP addresses can make a big difference.
So those are the immediate actions. What about longer-term strategies? What can organizations do to improve their overall security posture?
One of the most fundamental things is comprehensive asset discovery.
Okay.
You can't protect what you don't know you have.
Right.
Keep an up-to-date inventory of all your devices, systems, and applications.
Everything.
It sounds basic.
It does.
But you'd be surprised how many organizations don't have a clear understanding of their IT assets.
Okay, so know what you're defending.
Exactly. Regular and automated vulnerability scanning.
Okay.
Use tools to automatically scan your systems and applications for those known vulnerabilities.
Got it.
And do this regularly.
Not just a one-time thing.
No ongoing vigilance is key.
So it's like having a security guard constantly patrolling the perimeter.
Yeah, looking for any signs of weakness.
Okay, and once you've identified those vulnerabilities, what then?
Prioritize them based on how severe they are, how easy they are to exploit, and the potential impact they could have on your business.
And that's where those scoring systems like CVSS come in handy.
Exactly. They help you focus on the most critical ones first.
The ones that could cause the most damage.
Right.
What about integrating vulnerability management with other security processes?
That's essential.
Okay.
Vulnerability management shouldn't be siloed.
Right.
It needs to be integrated with other security processes like incident response and threat intelligence.
So that if a vulnerability is exploited and an incident occurs, you can respond quickly and contain the damage.
Exactly.
And it's not just about reacting to incidents. It's about proactively hunting for those threats, as we talked about earlier.
Right.
So this has been really informative.
It has.
But I have to admit, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this.
I understand.
It's a lot.
It is.
What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember from this deep dive so far?
The cybersecurity landscape is complex, and it's constantly changing. But the key is to shift from a reactive approach to a proactive approach to security.
Okay.
That means implementing the strategies we've talked about, patch management, access controls, vulnerability scanning, threat hunting.
Okay.
But it also means embracing a mindset of continuous improvement.
So it's not just about checking boxes. It's about constantly evaluating and adapting your security practices.
Exactly. Cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive into CVE 2025-0108.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
But there's still more to explore.
There is.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig even deeper into the implications of this vulnerability and what it means for the future of cybersecurity.
Sounds good. So, picking up where we left off, I think it's important to talk about collaboration.
Okay.
We can't have security teams working all by themselves anymore.
Right.
We need to break down those silos and really encourage communication between different departments, especially between security, operations, and development teams.
So you're talking about a DevSecOps culture, right?
Exactly.
Where security is baked into every single step of the way.
Yeah.
It's not just security professionals being the gatekeepers anymore.
Right.
It's about everyone taking responsibility for building and maintaining secure systems.
Exactly. Shifting security left is about making it an essential part of the development process, not something you just tack on at the end.
It makes sense to catch those security concerns early on.
It does.
But in a fast-paced development environment, doesn't that risk slowing things down?
It can.
I mean, how do we balance that need for speed with the need for security?
Well, that's where automation comes in.
Okay.
And the right tools. When you integrate security into that DevOps pipeline, you can automate those security checks and balances.
I see.
And that makes security a continuous process rather than these one-off time-consuming events.
Okay. And there are a lot of AI-enhanced security tools out there these days.
There are.
That can really help streamline things.
Absolutely.
You talked about how AI is being used by attackers.
All right.
But it can also be a powerful tool for defenders.
It can.
So how is AI changing the game for cybersecurity?
Well, it can analyze massive amounts of data,
Okay.
detect malware,
Right.
identify phishing attacks,
Mm-hmm.
and even proactively hunt for threats.
So it's like having a 247th security guard
Yeah,
that never gets tired,
exactly.
constantly monitoring your network,
Right.
looking for any sign of trouble.
It's like having an extra set of eyes,
Yeah.
always on the lookout.
Always learning,
Mm-hmm.
always adapting.
Right.
But even with AI,
Yeah,
we can't just rely on technology alone, can we?
we can't.
You mentioned proactive threat hunting before.
I did.
What does that actually look like in practice?
So threat hunting is a more proactive approach.
Okay.
It's intelligence-driven.
Yeah.
Think of it like a detective investigating a crime.
Okay.
They're looking for clues,
Right.
following leads,
Yeah.
trying to track down the culprit.
And in cybersecurity,
Mm-hmm.
those threat hunters use all sorts of techniques.
They do.
Data analysis,
Right.
threat intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
behavioral analytics,
Okay. To identify and investigate any suspicious activity.
anything that might have slipped past those traditional security controls.
Exact.
So they're not just waiting for the alarm to go off.
Mhm.
They're actively searching for those subtle signs.
Right. Something's not quite right.
Okay, so it sounds like staying ahead in cybersecurity requires a lot,
It does.
advanced technology,
Mhm.
proactive strategies,
Yeah.
and a deep understanding of the threats out there.
It's a constant evolution.
It is.
A cat and mouse game.
It is.
And the defenders have to be adaptable,
Yeah.
innovative to stay ahead.
This is all pretty intimidating.
I know it can seem that way.
What can the average person do to protect themselves?
Well, there are actually a lot of things that individuals can do
Okay.
to improve their own security hygiene.
So even if I'm not a cybersecurity expert,
Yeah.
there are still things I can do.
Absolutely.
Give me the top 3.
Okay, number 1, strong passwords.
Okay.
Use unique passwords for all your accounts.
I know.
I know it's a pain.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
But is it really that important?
It is your first line of defense.
Okay.
A weak password is like leaving your front door unlocked. It's an easy mistake.
Yeah.
But it can have big consequences.
Okay, strong passwords check.
Number 2, be careful about phishing scams.
Phishing scams.
Yeah, these are those emails or text messages that try to trick you into giving up sensitive information.
Like your login detail.
Exactly, or your credit card number.
So if I get an email from a Nigerian prince,
Yeah, probably best to just delete that one.
okay, good advice.
Phishing attacks are getting more sophisticated all the time.
So we have to be extra careful.
You do always double-check the sender before you click on anything.
All right, so strong passwords, watch out for phishing.
And number 3, keep your software updated.
Ugh, the updates can be so annoying.
They can, but they're important.
Okay.
Those updates often include security patches
Right.
that fix known vulnerabilities.
So it's like getting a flu shot.
It
protects you from getting sick.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
delaying those updates
Yeah.
is like skipping your flu shot.
You're putting yourself at risk.
You are.
Okay, so strong passwords, watch out for phishing, and keep my software updated.
You got it.
Any other advice for us non-experts out there?
Just be mindful of what you share online.
Okay.
Think before you post personal information,
Right.
sensitive data,
Mm-hmm.
even your vacation plans.
On social media.
The more you share,
Yeah.
the bigger a target you become.
Okay, so it's all about being aware of the risks
Yes.
and taking those steps to protect ourselves.
Right.
Both at work and at home.
Exactly. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility.
It is.
We all have to do our part.
I'm feeling a lot more informed now,
Good.
but also a little bit overwhelmed.
It's a complex topic,
It is.
but I appreciate you breaking it down
Yeah.
into manageable steps.
And highlighting those everyday things we can do to stay safe.
Absolutely.
This has been really eye-opening.
It has.
The bad guys are getting more sophisticated,
Yeah.
but there are things we can do to fight back.
There are.
Awareness is key.
It is.
The more we know,
Mm-hmm.
the better prepared we are.
That's right.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay.
But the journey's not over.
It's not.
Stay tuned for part 3,
All right.
where we'll explore the potential impact of CVE 2025-0108 on the future of cybersecurity.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into this CVE 2025-0108.
Right.
We've gone over the technical details,
We have.
explored the whole cybersecurity landscape,
Yeah.
even shared some practical tips for organizations and individuals.
Right.
But now I kind of want to step back
Okay.
and think about the bigger picture,
Yeah.
you know, the long game.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of impact might this vulnerability have on the future of cybersecurity?
Well, I think it's a huge wake-up call.
Okay.
It shows us that we can't just treat security as an afterthought.
Right.
It needs to be built into the entire technology life cycle.
From the very beginning.
Yes, from design to development.
To maintenance, to updates, everything.
So it's not just about bolting on security at the end.
No.
It's about baking it in from the start.
It needs to be foundational.
Right.
Part of the DNA of the technology.
This applies to everything, right?
Everything.
Software, hardware,
Yeah.
network infrastructure.
Right.
Even the way we approach data privacy.
Absolutely.
So how do we actually do this?
Okay.
How do we put this into practice?
Well, one approach that's gaining some traction is secure by design.
Secure by design. Yeah, it's a software development methodology
Okay.
that really prioritizes security considerations at every single stage.
So it's not just about writing secure code.
No, it's about anticipating those potential threats.
Right.
And building in defenses from the ground up.
So you're thinking like an attacker,
In a way.
trying to understand their tactics and building defenses that can withstand their attacks.
Right. It's like designing a fortress.
Okay.
You wouldn't just build strong walls.
Yeah.
You'd think about guard towers, moats, those extra layers of defense.
So it's about creating that multi-layered security posture.
Exactly.
But I imagine this requires a bit of a cultural shift
It does.
within those development teams.
Yeah.
Developers are always under pressure to deliver features quickly.
Right.
How do we make sure security doesn't slow them down?
That's a great point. And that's where DevSecOps is so crucial.
Okay.
We touched on this before.
We did.
But it's all about integrating security practices into that DevOps workflow. So you're automating those security checks, implementing continuous security testing,
Right.
and you're fostering collaboration between developers and security professionals.
So everyone's working together
Exactly.
towards that common goal.
Security becomes part of the process,
Right.
not an obstacle.
And AI can play a big role here, too.
AI can definitely help streamline things.
We've talked about how attackers are using it,
Yeah,
but AI can also be a really valuable tool for defenders.
absolutely.
So how is AI changing the game for cybersecurity?
It can analyze huge amounts of data,
Right.
detect malware, identify phishing attacks,
Okay.
even proactively hunt for threats.
So it's like having that super-powered security card.
Yep. Always watching, always learning.
And AI is only going to get more sophisticated, right?
It is.
Leading to even more advanced security systems.
Right. Imagine a system that can not only detect known threats,
Yeah.
but also predict future attacks.
That's like something out of a movie.
It does sound futuristic.
Yeah. But it's closer than you think.
Really?
Yeah, we're moving beyond reactive security towards a more proactive and predictive approach.
But with any powerful technology, there are ethical considerations.
There are.
Especially as AI becomes more prevalent in cybersecurity.
Right.
So what are some of those ethical considerations?
As these AI systems become more autonomous, we need to make sure they're transparent, accountable, and unbiased.
So they're not making decisions based on flawed data.
Exactly. Or biased algorithms.
Because that could have some serious consequences.
It could.
False positives.
Right.
Discrimination. Denial of essential services.
It's a big responsibility.
It is.
We need to make sure that AI is used for good.
Right.
That it's enhancing security and protecting privacy.
Not undermining them.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about the human values.
Yeah.
The principles that guide its development and deployment. We need to have those conversations, develop those ethical frameworks, and constantly monitor these AI systems.
And make sure they're aligned with their values.
And that they're serving the greater good.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into CVE 2025-0108 and all its implications, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
The future of cybersecurity is a shared responsibility.
A shared responsibility.
We all have a role to play
Okay.
in securing our digital world.
So it's not just about firewalls and antivirus software.
No, it's bigger than that.
Okay.
We need to break down those silos, foster collaboration, and build a culture of security awareness
At every level.
from the developers who write the code to the individuals who use it every day.
So cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility.
That is.
Not just the IT department.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored the technical stuff, talked about the evolving threat landscape,
Right.
and even touched on the potential of AI.
It's a complex landscape,
It is.
but it's also an exciting time.
It is.
There's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, there are challenges, But I'm optimistic.
Me too.
By being proactive.
Yes.
By working together. And by prioritizing security at every level.
Absolutely.
I think we can create a more secure digital world.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And stay safe out there.
You too.